And we'd also like to welcome Cecil Lammey, who is our guest speaker this evening. He's come over from Denver, and you had good weather coming over, didn't you? No snowstorm. So everybody's looking forward to hearing from him, not from me. And now I'd like to introduce Keith Lammey, who will be introducing his nephew, Cecil Lammey. Cecil, this is your second year around. You're going to have to really work to top yourself. But I want you to know we have some Steeler fans here, we have some Raider fans here, and we have a lot of Bronco fans. Come on up, Keith, and Cecil, and take over. Thank you for coming.
I could go on for a long time about my nephew, but I'm not going to speak a lot about him other than to tell you that he is a senior writer for footballguys.com. He is known in the industry as a fantasy football guru, and he truly is. He is sought after by a lot of people. And the one thing that I want to share with you that you don't know is he has great verbal talents that you know about and football knowledge, but he's also an illustrator. And within the next couple of months, he will go, a product that he's working on, what's it called, Grabbus? Grabbus is an illustrated comic book, is that right? That will be available on Amazon. He has great artistic skills in addition to his football knowledge. So please welcome my nephew, my friend, Cecil Lammey.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks once again for having me here. It's simply awesome to be in the mountains. I get to stare at them in Littleton, but it's great to be in them and to be here with you once again. Thanks to everyone for your hospitality, for the fine food, and the questions that I'm sure I will get. Chiefs, Broncos, Raiders, Steelers, whatever questions you have. What, Packers? Once I'm done talking, don't forget the Chargers, about and all teams, 32, I'll talk about them all when I finish talking about turning negatives into positives. Kind of the theme of my speech this year largely comes from the Super Bowl loss that we all had to endure. I covered the Denver Broncos, of course, and that was bad. That was rough. I will get to that in just a little bit. But as I was thinking about turning negatives into positives and thinking about John Elway, who now, after 10 years in the media and being a huge fan of John Elway, now to be on first name basis with him, I will tell you this, he is more focused and dedicated than ever to winning a Super Bowl championship. And I'll get to the reasons how and why in just a little bit. But I kept remembering things from my childhood and growing up that, regardless of being aware of it, I was turning negatives into positives. Dad will remember this. The very first roping that I ever competed in, I won. It was breakaway roping, and there was a rule in place that if you missed your first throw, you could throw again. And I was the last roper to compete that day, and I went out, and I was nervous, and I was tight, and I threw my rope, and it fell way short. Well, Dad was telling me, you can keep going. You can throw again. Just make sure you throw and you hit this time. And nobody, I can't remember how old I was, but nobody had caught a calf yet. And so I thought, well, as long as I wait for the right opportunity, I'm gonna catch this calf. So without any time limit, and there was probably some guffaws and some moaning, 7 minutes and 34 seconds later, I caught that calf. I turned a negative into a positive, and there wasn't a time limit. And 7 minutes in roping is an eternity, when most calves are caught in 5 seconds, 7 seconds tops. So, but I did it. And it's a trend that, again, really unbeknownst to me, that continued throughout my life. When I was in high school, my high school coach and I had an interesting relationship. There's not a black leather sofa, so I won't get into our relationship, but it wasn't good. And when I was a junior and he would not play me on JV, I was a pretty good basketball player in high school. I ended up transferring from Grover, Colorado to Pine Bluff, Wyoming. It was a school that's 4 times as big. There wasn't 8 people in my class, there was 35. And there was a pregnant girl in high school, and I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe it, people. I went from that small school to a bigger school, and I started varsity. So I turned a negative into a positive. Later on, years and years and years later, 2003, and I had called in to several radio shows. I was a machinist in Arvada, Colorado, making firefighting equipment for our Forest Service. A damn good machinist, but I wasn't happy, you know. And I remember calling in, and I thought I could do this. Like, I could be on the radio and I could talk about football. I don't know anything. Rockies, Nuggets, Avalanche, nothing but a blank stare. But I've always had this great passion for football. So I told my boss at the time, who was a Chiefs fan, I'm not going to hold that against him, but I said, you know, I'm gonna get hired, I'm gonna have my own radio show. This was in 2003, and he just laughed at me. He's like, no, get back to work. And I'm very proud to say that this year alone, in 2014, I've been on SportsCenter, Colin Cowherd's show, CNN, NFL Network, got a spot on NFL Network tomorrow. So anyway, the point is, turn the negative of someone telling me that I couldn't do something into a positive of working for ESPN now, and ESPN Radio. So there's something that all of us can do out there, and no matter what you do, and no matter what the situation is, you can change that energy. Now, how many people here know Kung Fu? Or know about Kung Fu? You're all going to raise your hand, or you're going to think of the old TV show with David Carradine, whatever. We all are Kung Fu fighting, but we've actually misinterpreted the definition of Kung Fu. The Chinese, it is a Chinese term referring to any study, learning, or practice that requires patience, energy, and time to complete. When I was roping, and it took me 7 minutes to catch that calf, that was patience. When I was in high school and I went from one school not playing JV to starting varsity at a bigger school, that was energy, that was time, that was patience. The radio thing, same thing. To go from a caller who called in regularly to a show host now, years later, that's patience, time, and energy. That's just Kung Fu. And it can refer to any skill that is achieved through hard work and patience and practice. These are all very important things no matter what we do and whatever industry we do. And I said earlier about going from one school to another, or going from that first throw to my second throw. And in my first throw I was nervous, I was tentative. My second throw I relaxed. My second chance at playing high school basketball, I relaxed and I was better. And I think that there's an old saying in riding motorcycles, if you see something in the road and if you stare at it, you're going to hit it. And you've got to always be aware on a motorcycle of everything around you so you know how to get around it. And I think that translates into life. If you see it, you're going to hit it, good and bad. Now we can make it good, and we can take any negative that has been thrust upon us, whether by our own doing or something else, and we can turn that into a positive. Again, it's an energy. And I bring up Kung Fu because in Kung Fu, the martial art that we're mostly, aware of, you use your enemy's momentum against him, and you turn that energy into your strike and your ability to win. And I think we can really do that in life and in business and in personal relationships, just in staying positive. I've always said this. People ask me all the time, how do you do what you do? How do you get in the media? You ask a lot of questions, you stay polite, and you wait. And you have to have patience. And in time, if you do those things, mainly being polite, people will be quite surprised what you can get when you ask and when you're nice about it. Not a lot of people do that anymore. It's something that can be rewarding to you. And when I talk about relaxing and staying calm and not worrying about things, just knowing that you will work things out, keeping that goal in mind, whatever it is, that you're going to hit. You are going to hit that goal, both positive or negative, so make sure to focus on the positive. We all know people that all they do is say, I can't, when they should be saying the exact opposite. Because if you say you can't, then you're not going to. If I would have went to my boss and said, I want to be on the radio, and he'd laughed at me and said, no, get back to work, if I would have believed that I couldn't do that, then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't do that. But I believed that I could, so I did. And it's pretty simple. And to sum that up, I would say we just need more John Elways. Again, in years of being around John and knowing his history with the Denver Broncos and how he performs as an executive now and general manager of the Denver Broncos, we need more people like him. Because John Elway likes to prove his doubters wrong, but he loves to prove his supporters right. And I think that's an important distinction. Because again, you're focusing more on the positive than on the negative. You love to prove your supporters right. And obviously in Broncos country, there are a lot of supporters for those Denver Broncos. We go through his history. In 1983, this guy could play baseball, was going to be picked by the Yankees, was on the Yankees, could play Major League Baseball if he wanted to. The Indianapolis Colts, or Baltimore Colts at the time, had the first pick. And the Irsay family, not a good reputation around the league, still continues to this day. They were essentially going to pick John Elway, and he didn't want to. And he did the bold move that no one had ever done before in the NFL and said, no, if you pick me, I'm not going to go. So he turned that negative situation into a positive because he had baseball he could go play. So that was his first negative in the NFL. Then, of course, the pick traded for Broncos, get John Elway, turns it into a big positive. But we think of this Super Bowl, I want you to remember the first three that John lost. Those were just as bad. I mean, 55-10, those were thumpings of a grand scale on the biggest game of the season. And people would label him as a loser. People would label him as a choker. People would label him as a guy that's never going to win a championship. And had he believed that, then he wouldn't have 2 Super Bowl rings later. But of course, he didn't believe that. Another thing that people don't talk about enough is his relationship with Dan Reeves. I thought my relationship with my high school coach was bad. Dan Reeves and John Elway didn't see eye to eye, because I actually have a copy of Dan Reeves' playbook right here. It's called Run, 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 Punt. That's essentially what he did. And I love Dan Reeves. I love Dan Reeves. I've talked to him many times. Anyone who can mix pert near into a sentence, I love you. So thanks to Dan Reeves, because he'll call games now for, I think it's Westward One Radio. He'll call Falcons games and he'll mix in pert near. And I get all giddy when I hear that. So I love Dan Reeves, and John Elway's not going to say anything bad about Dan Reeves in public, but privately you knew there was some headbutting going on, because they didn't see eye to eye. But he turned that negative of working with a coach that didn't want him to use his natural skill into a positive. And eventually, without Dan Reeves, he won 2 Super Bowls, in fact, beating Dan Reeves in the Super Bowl 33 against those Falcons. So now as an executive, and I believe I shared this story before, so if I did, I'll keep it somewhat brief. It was 2011 Shrine Game. I'm in Orlando. And I go out to lunch with a group of scouts, a couple of Bears guys, and Lions guy, and a Chiefs guy. And they're making fun of the John Elway move, because Elway was hired as an executive by the Broncos. They're like, oh, he loves to play golf too much. And I said, no, you don't know John. What if he wanted to go buy a group of islands and canoe between each island every day for the rest of his life, that's what he would do. He could do anything that he wants. He wants to make the Broncos great again. We all remember the Josh McDaniels years, and those were nightmarish. I'm half Mexican, so I speak Spanish. There were landscapers out at Dove Valley, which is Broncos headquarters, that would tell me in Spanish. They would cuss out McDaniels, and they would say he yelled at them in Spanish. He went bilingual to be a jerk. But again, you know, again, you see it, you're going to hit it. He wanted to be a jerk. He was a jerk to everyone, to secretaries, to coaches, to players. And, well, now he had to run home to New England. But John Elway wanted to make the Broncos great again. He could play golf all day, do whatever all day. He wanted to make them great again. And he knows how to build a franchise and a winning organization. He knows football. So that's what he's worked hard to do. In fact, at that Shrine game in 2011, there was this kid named Julius Thomas there. And he was a basketball player who had 40 catches as 1 year of college football, 1 year of high school football. He was a basketball player. And I had a 5th round grade on him. People called me crazy. Broncos took him in the 4th round. And now that he's healthy, he's a Pro Bowl player. You all know the name of Julius Thomas. In fact, when I see JT in the locker room where we go hang out, I call him Shrine Game. That's my nickname for him. Because at the Shrine Game, nobody knew who he was. When he was at the Combine, there were 2 people sitting at his interview table, me and Danny O'Neal. So that type of player was plucked because John Elway knows talent. Danny Trevathan, a 6th round pick, he knows talent. Now, not every pick's worked out. Certainly Ronnie Hillman has left some of us with egg on our face. May or may not be me, but you know, Elway is doing his best to put this team back on the right track. The Baltimore playoff loss 2 years ago. They would have won the Super Bowl had they beat Baltimore. And the game was 6 degrees, negative 13 wind chill. What's ironic and sad is that the next Saturday, because that playoff game was on a Saturday, I was at Red Rocks with my kids and it was 60 degrees. And I was like, why wasn't this a week ago? Denver would have won the Super Bowl. I would have been in New Orleans for the Super Bowl. So the Baltimore playoff loss was big, and they talked last year about John Elway making it uncomfortable at Dove Valley. Peyton Manning made it uncomfortable for people at Dove Valley. And you saw last year, and hopefully remember, that the 55 touchdown passes that Manning had, the near 5,500 yards passing, all NFL records, bunch of points, exciting games, all the way to the Super Bowl, and then this happened. Now, I got to see a show of hands here. How many, and 2 questions, 2-part question. How many of you watched the Super Bowl? Show of hands. How many watched the entire Super Bowl? Wow, more than I thought, more than I thought. So congrats to you Broncos fans. You had to suffer through that. That was a suffering, with great irony, by the way, because the Broncos liked Russell Wilson when he came out. They liked Brock Osweiler, Russell Wilson, and Nick Foles. And had they kept Tim Tebow, had Peyton Manning not become available or whatever, they would have drafted Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson would have beat Tim Tebow. And Russell Wilson would have been their starting quarterback. The point is this. You suffered through that. And I've talked to many of you, whether it's on Twitter, on Facebook, emails, calling into my radio show, whatever it is. Everyone's so sad and upset and mad, angry at John Fox for not having the team more prepared, angry at Manny Ramirez for snapping that ball off to the side of Peyton Manning's face, angry at Manning himself for seeming starstruck in the biggest game of his Broncos career. The anger will subside. And one of the ways that I can assure you it will subside is because, well, you'll get over it. Secondly, the product on the field will still be of a high quality. Because John Elway, he got mad. 2 days after the Super Bowl, we had our post-game press conference out at Dove Valley. And all the other writers, not me, but all the other writers, oh, Seattle is so good. How could you possibly beat Seattle? We get to the end of the press conference. John Elway says, wait a second, I'm going to tell you guys something. I'm not going to take anything away from Seattle. What they did, fine football team, great players, they're champions, they deserve it. But we are not afraid of Seattle. We are not trying to be Seattle. We are trying to beat Seattle. Because everyone that was asking questions was bringing up things like, well, why aren't you bigger and tougher? How do you match the aggression? And are you guys a soft team? Are you guys a finesse team? It made Elway mad. And you could see that. And you could see that competitive spirit inside of him. You have to have ambition. You have to have competitiveness in your life no matter what you do. And this Super Bowl loss, again, if you believe in the law of every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. They got smoked on the biggest stage possible. What's the rebound from that? What's the repercussion? What's going to happen this year? Well, I can say fairly confidently they're the best team in the AFC. They're better than the Patriots. Sorry if you love Tom Brady. It's just not the case. They're better than the Colts, who are an up-and-coming team. They're the best team in their own conference. Are they better than Seattle? We'll see. But when you make moves this year, and again, with some salary cap gymnastics that they had to pull off, this team went out and got DeMarcus Ware. He's a Hall of Fame player who had 6 sacks last year because he had a busted up elbow. This year, he's healthy, and he's huge. I talked to him yesterday, and he's huge. And he's a great pass rusher. He's also a mentor to Von Miller. People don't realize that when Elvis Dumervil left, they didn't lose his 10 sacks, okay? How many of you can remember an impact sack that Elvis Dumervil had? They didn't exist. He was a mentor to Von Miller. He kept Von Miller's head on straight and kept him out of trouble. Getting DeMarcus Ware gets you 10 plus sacks, but it also gets you a mentor. And that's more important for a guy like Von Miller, who's incredibly talented. Got to keep him on the straight and narrow. DeMarcus Ware will do that. So this team didn't sit back and rest on their laurels. They went out and got the best cornerback available at the time. I know Darrelle Revis was available about 24 hours later, but at the time, they get Aqib Talib. He's better than Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie because he can actually tackle, and he's not afraid of contact like DRC was. You go out and you get Emmanuel Sanders. Listen, I know everybody loves Eric Decker. I know the ladies love Eric Decker. Eric Decker's got it all. I'll just leave it at that. But he's got it all, okay? He's not as good as Emmanuel Sanders could be in this offense because Sanders is fast and Sanders can get open. Decker, as much as I love and appreciate him, he didn't get separation, didn't get open as good. So they got an upgrade at defensive end. They got an upgrade at cornerback. They got an upgrade at wide receiver. They got a huge upgrade at safety. Mike Adams is a great veteran, but he's nowhere near what TJ Ward is. So all these moves that Denver has made, instead of feeling bad about themselves, instead of thinking, well, how can we possibly compete with Seattle? They're just so good, and they're so physical, and they're so tough. John Elway went out and made this team tougher. He made this team better. He made this team faster. He made this team more explosive offensively. He made this team more aggressive. Letting Noshawn Moreno go. Point of contention with some Broncos fans out there. Why wouldn't they bring Moreno back? Noshawn Moreno ran against 6-man boxes on 79.7% of his carries last year and could barely get 1,000 yards. When you're up against Seattle and they're shutting down your passing game, if you have a back, that maybe it's Monte Ball, but let's just say a back like Terrell Davis, who can say, okay, you're taking the passing game away, we're just going to run it down your throat, then you're going to respect the run, then Manning's going to shred you. Moreno wasn't that guy. Monte Ball could be that guy, and John Elway made the bold decision. He could have paid Moreno a nominal fee, I think, a couple million a year for a running back. It's not that much money, but he didn't because he saw something better in starting Monte Ball and using Monte Ball as a future back. So all of these things shows to me that John Elway has good kung fu. That is the proper way to say it, by the way. Kung fu is not a martial art. It is the practice of improving your skill, no matter what skill that is. Uncle Keith said I was a good artist. I have kung fu in artistry. I have kung fu on the radio. As my head expands even larger. So no matter what any of us do, we can be like John Elway. And that's kind of the final point of my speech, is just no matter what you do and where you're at, and whether it's talking with your kids or talking with loved ones, sharing that positivity, sharing your kung fu, and no matter what you do, and remembering, just like John Elway, only the best is good enough. So if you're a Broncos fan and you're down, and you're thinking about the draft here in a couple of weeks, just know this, that John Elway is going to build a champion. And last year was painful, the year before that was painful, but from that pain and with patience will come sweet victory. So again, just everyone out there, thank you very much. And be like John Elway and have good John Elway kung fu. So. That's it. I'll open up for questions now. sir.
Okay, I asked you this a little while ago.
Okay.
I didn't hear the answer. How could John Elway, with his experience in 5 Super Bowls, 3 of them get blown out, 2 of them being successful, why was that team not better prepared for the Super Bowl?
The fact that they didn't practice with crowd noise, I think, is the biggest issue for me. In terms of preparation, the Super Bowl is a different animal for many reasons. There's a lot of outside influences, and I'm not making any excuses for them. But the lack of preparation was very evident immediately in that game. I think being in New York had something to do with it, obviously setting up tickets for your family and all the other stuff that goes along with that. They had a game plan installed the week before, and usually that's a good thing. This time it wasn't. They should have looked at having alternate game plans. Like I said, when it didn't work with Manning, they should have had a plan to go to Ball or Moreno more. They didn't have any plan to do that. It's like when they tried what had worked the whole season and it didn't work, they were just like, let's just keep trying it. So that is something I think that was a mistake.
But still, with Elway's experience at getting blown out.
Right.
And those guys, when they come down the tunnel, they were starstruck before that first play when the ball went.
Right. And then they were really starstruck.
Yeah, so it was, I just was disappointed in Elway, and I'm a big Elway fan.
Right.
Really disappointed that he didn't get the team prepared, not Fox, but Elway.
Well, I will say this, as much as I can say. He's pretty upset, obviously, and there have been movements within the franchise, more emphasis on certain things that will hopefully negate that. Good. The next question. You, sir.
In the 1st of August, there's 32 general managers that will tell you that they've improved their team in the last year.
Right.
Okay.
Lots of liars in the NFL.
Well, I mean, that's the way it is. You
Yeah.
just listen to them, they'll tell you that.
Yeah.
I know that you've had a long relationship with this man, which puts you theoretically on his side, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay. How much time do you think Elway has with Manning, time-wise?
Based off last year, and I always said this, Manning would play 3 years with the Broncos. Based on it now, he's got 3 years left on his contract, as long as he stays healthy. And by the way, it's not the neck. The neck is stronger than it was pre-surgery. That scar is huge, by the way. It's really a huge scar. His neck is stronger. It's the nerve regeneration in his right arm. So long as his nerves are okay, I think Peyton Manning can blow out his entire contract. And I would not have said that last year at this time. I would have said that he's got 2 more years and then he's done. No. Based off 55 touchdowns, he's going to play, until he's carried off the field.
He'll be 40 at the end of his contract? I
Yes, he'll be 40 at the end of his contract. Now, if they win a Super Bowl, maybe he says, I can go out on top like Elway did. That's a possibility. But Manning is one of those guys that is like Brett Favre. He's not going to walk away until he's pretty much forced to. So I think he plays 3 more years, which means Brock Osweiler leaves because they only have Brock for 2 more years. Yeah. Next question. Okay, the draft, I leave for New York City in 2 weeks from tomorrow, so I'm excited about that. They're going to do, in the first 3 rounds, it's going to be a combination of cornerback, middle linebacker, or wide receiver. Even though they grabbed Emmanuel Sanders, even though they still have Wes Welker, Welker only has 1 more year left, and Sanders had foot problems when he came out of SMU 2 years ago. He's been healthy the last 2 years, but you still want to set yourself up. Welker had those concussion problems. They're going to draft a wide receiver, probably not in the first round. It's a very deep class of wide receivers, so they could wait until the 2nd or 3rd round. If C.J. Mosley, inside linebacker from Alabama, is there, they run to the podium with that pick. I don't think it happens. He's not going to get past Baltimore, from what sources tell me. Chicago is very interested in him as well. And those guys are sitting up there at 15 and 16. The Broncos aren't going to move from 31 to 16 to get Mosley. They may draft Ryan Shazier. They worked him out last week from Ohio State. He's an outside linebacker, but he's very fast. And I believe he can play inside and middle. People say he's too light. He's 232 pounds. Luke Kuechly, who's probably the best middle linebacker in the game, when he came into the league was 237. So 5 pounds to me is a good meal out, okay? He'll put on that 5 pounds. Some middle linebacker emphasis. And then they'll get another corner. This is a good cornerback class at the top, and they need another corner because Talib, as good as he is, has never played a full season in his 6-year career. And Chris Harris is coming back from partially torn ACL, and Kayvon Webster had some struggles as a rookie. So they'll draft a middle linebacker, a corner, and a wide receiver in their first 3 picks. And the outside chance that they draft Western Richburg, the center from Colorado State, because he compares closely to Jeff Saturday, who worked with Manning at the Colts, compares closely to that, athletic center, smart, can change the plays at the line of scrimmage when Manning calls an audible. Richburg's a 10-year starter at a position that's very rare. So maybe in the first round they go Western Richburg. I have heard that that would be an option for them. Running back in the last day of the draft. And I will suggest, as I have publicly and privately, I always let my feelings be known to the team. Isaiah Crowell from Georgia, and he transferred to Alabama State. He's, because of his transfer, because of a weapons charge that was later dropped, he transferred colleges. He's probably the most naturally talented back in this class, and he could be a starter. He won't be initially. And when I talked to Isaiah at the combine, I asked him, I said, how are you going to feel not being the man? Because he's always been the man, and now he's going to have to play special teams. And he said, of course, he said he'd be fine with it. So that's who I would suggest in the 4th, 5th round. You, sir.
If you're the general manager of Houston, are you going to take Bonnie?
Yes. Is this in reference to taking Johnny Manziel? Otherwise? I don't like Johnny Manziel. I will say that. I'm one of the few people that don't, because it seems like people have fallen in love with this kid. And I will say this, what he did in college worked well. Run around, making plays, sandlot football. It's what Tebow did. Whereas Tebow was too dumb to make it in the NFL, and that's something, people always talk about the throwing motion and everything, and I love Tebow. He was a sweet guy. He was always nice to me, but he was sweet, but he wasn't intelligent enough to play quarterback in the NFL. That's why he failed. That's why he didn't have a job last year. I think Johnny Manziel was too stubborn, because he'll turn his back to the defense, he throws off his back foot, he abandons the pocket too soon, he won't take a hit and make the throw, he'll leave, and instead of making a throw where he'd get a 20-yard gain, he'll try to run for 4 yards. That's fine at Texas A&M, it doesn't work in the NFL. If I'm the Texans, I take Clowney because he's the more rare prospect compared closely to Bruce Smith. The last player that was freakishly athletic as a pass rusher was Bruce Smith. And that was 1985. So you have a chance to get that rare of an athlete. I take Clowney. You, sir. Chiefs question.
If you needed a quarterback,
Yeah,
who
like
would
the
you
Chiefs
draft?
do. Here's what I'd do if I was the Chiefs. This is a quarterback class that is very interesting because of Johnny Manziel, who's still going to be a top 10 pick. I wouldn't take him in the first round. I'd take him in the second round, develop him. But you've got Blake Bortles. Of course, in the first round, he's going to be a top 10 pick. You've got Teddy Bridgewater, who should be a top 10 pick. Knock on wood. He's smart and accurate. That's all that you need. He's my favorite quarterback. Here's what I do if I'm Kansas City, who has not won a game with a quarterback they drafted since Todd Blackledge in 1987. That's been a while. I'm going to wait until the 4th or 5th round, and I'm going to draft Brett Smith from Wyoming. I was up in Laramie at Wyoming's Pro Day. Brett Smith was not invited to the Combine because he was a junior entry, and they didn't expect him to come out. National Football Scouting, who selects the players for the Combine, they didn't expect him to come out, so when he declared, they just told him no, because they hadn't done any research on him, which, again, I think is ridiculous. But so he only had his Pro Day to really kind of show off his stuff. He's strong work ethic, strong leader. He's faster than Johnny Manziel. He has 10-inch hands, had a 10.8 broad jump, which shows good explosion. These numbers are all better than Johnny Manziel, and you can coach him. Whereas Johnny Manziel is a player who just does it his own way. He's not going to listen to you. If I'm Andy Reid, I take that quarterback and I let him sit behind Alex Smith for a couple of more years. If you were talking Chiefs. Yeah, good kid. Any other questions? You, sir.
I believe it was Anderson of the Seahawks
talks that said they had decoded Manny's signal? And they
Yes.
knew what the plays were gonna be?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
listening great to that?
I believe so, yes, and the route combinations. And again, what I said earlier to the question of, they had their game plan in place, and they had specific route combinations based on the formation. So if you see a bunch formation, Demaryius Thomas was always as the X receiver on the left side of the formation, for the most part. But if you saw a bunch with Julius, Welker, and Decker, based on where they were in that formation, you knew that Welker was going to run an under route. You knew that Julius was trying to attack the seam, and you knew that Decker was probably running a go route or a comeback. They deciphered that based on film study. The Broncos didn't change that. And again, it's kind of an organizational arrogance, I think that's the nicest way I could say it, where you do something, and this is the way we're going to do it, and we're not going to try to smoke and mirrors, we're not going to try to change it up. And so what everybody said, Earl Thomas, Richard Sherman, what they all said, in my opinion, was true. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you think about the Packers' chances this year?
I love Ted Thompson, their general manager. Ted Thompson, when I go to these all-star games, I go to the Shrine Game and Senior Bowl and Texas Nation Game, all these all-star games, Ted Thompson beats me there. At the weigh-ins, where we get to watch the players, it's kind of bizarre, honestly. We get to watch the players strut up in their underwear, stand on a stage, get weighed and measured. And Ted Thompson is the first guy there. He likes guys in underwear. But he also is a great general manager who can find great players. And so long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy, what they found with Eddie Lacy, who I think should have been the pick instead of Monte Ball last year. Eddie Lacy, who had the toe injury, who cares if he plays 2 years if you get a Super Bowl or two out of him? As long as Aaron Rodgers is healthy with what they have with Eddie Lacy, it's no issue to lose James Jones to the Raiders in free agency. Raiders assembling a great group. Sorry if you're a Raiders fan. Really, I am. But the Packers at the top of the NFC North, which is always kind of a weird division, I think what they've done this offseason is going to put them right back in Super Bowl contention. It comes down to three things: Seattle, San Francisco, and Green Bay's the third team, but they're third on that list. So how do they compare to Seattle and San Francisco? That'll be the test. Any other questions?
The other side, AFC.
Yeah.
What are the top three there?
Top three, in my opinion, are Denver at the top, New England would be a second, and then Indianapolis. New England's a second, not because they added Brandon LaFell, such a terrible move. Guy was inconsistent at LSU. He was inconsistent with Carolina. They want better targets for Tom Brady. They should have gotten better targets than Brandon LaFell. Kid can't catch, but the point is this. They got Darrelle Revis to replace Aqib Talib. That is an upgrade. And they waited. Revis was not available when the Broncos added Talib. They add Talib. The next day, Revis is released. Patriots scoop him right up. So that is a strong move. It's Tom Brady. I don't care if they lost LeGarrette Blount. He didn't do anything in the postseason against Denver specifically. So it's Brady as the second. And then I'm going to put the Colts at third, because Andrew Luck is that special talent. He is that 1983 John Elway type of quarterback. That's Andrew Luck. And if I'm the Irsays, and I'm Jim Irsay, I would have kept Manning and let Luck sit. And then if you wanted to, if you really wanted to get Luck in there, you should have traded him. But that's Jim Irsay. He doesn't always use the most rational of thoughts. So, yeah. So those are my top three in the AFC. And in the AFC North, as a lifelong Steelers fan, it pains me to say they're not gonna do anything. So Steelers, Ravens, Browns, Bengals, whatever. Andy Dalton's got to win a playoff game before I get excited about Cincinnati. So, yeah. So there's that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What about the Bears?
I love Mark Trestman. I love him, and I've had a chance to hang out with him, essentially, with some of my scouting buddies. Mark Trestman is a smart man. He is pretty much a genius in terms of offensive football. And if he can get Cutler to buy in, which is very difficult, I don't have much good to say about Jay Cutler, I'll be honest. He's not a good guy. And things haven't changed that much in Chicago. But if he bought into Mark Trestman, which I believe he did a little bit last year before he was hurt, then that's nothing but a good thing. And they've got Brandon Marshall, they got the Black Unicorn, Martellus Bennett, they got Alshon Jeffrey on offense, they got this kid named Marquise Wilson, who was, what, a 6th-round pick last year at Washington State, super fast. He's great, in my opinion, going to take the place of Earl Bennett. So they're on the right track. Defensively, they have a ton of issues. So that's why they would be interested in C.J. Mosley, because they're looking for their Brian Urlacher.
Well, they picked up that, the guy from Minnesota.
Right, yeah, and Jared Allen.
Right.
Yeah, so I gotta love that. Although I do take issue with Jared Allen as a Cowboy, maybe not currently practicing Cowboy. Jared Allen has a sack dance where he ties a calf, but he only goes around twice. That calf's gonna kick out of that. So next time I talk to Jared, I'll tell him, you're supposed to go 1, 2, 3 hooey.
There's
Not
no
just.
calves in Chicago anymore.
Exactly, no calves in Chicago. Yes, sir.
How about them Cowboys?
Well, our question is, why don't they put Romo with these Raiders?
Yeah,
What's
they.
still in the NFL?
They could possibly draft a young quarterback this year as kind of a Romo replacement. I will say this, I hope you like Mike Shanahan, because I believe, no sources involved in this, but I believe that Mike Shanahan's going to be their next coach. I don't think Jason Garrett, I'm surprised Jason Garrett kept his job, honestly. And some guys, yeah, that's not going to happen. So, in losing DeMarcus, that's going to hurt as well. I think it's a boost for the Broncos, and it's a bad sign for the direction the Cowboys are going. Until they get done with the Romo experiment, as I often say, there's 12 teams in the NFL that have their quarterback. There's 20 teams that are kidding themselves. The Cowboys are kidding themselves.
Yes.
Romo is not a championship quarterback.
Agreed.
He will make the fatal flaw every time.
Yes.
In crunch time, he will make the fatal flaw. And that's why he's not a championship quarterback. So,
Jimmy Jones needs to stay off.
yeah, but the problem is Stephen Jones, his son, is
Yeah.
general manager, and he's the owner that thinks he's a general manager, and yeah, on and on and on. So, the nice thing is that you're in a division with the Giants and Washington and Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia probably wins that division. Any other questions? You, sir.
Yes, I have to ask you about Dyson.
Mm-hmm.
Is he a potential future, or?
Is Mike McCartney going to watch this? Because that's his agent, and he's Bill McCartney's son. And I love Bill. I know him personally, and I know Mike McCartney personally, but Mike doesn't like me because I don't like Dysart. And I always say what I see. You know, when I see C.J. LeBoy, who's the agent for Robert Huron, the wide receiver from Wyoming, and he says, I love what you wrote about my guy. Thanks for saying that. And I said, well, that's because he's good. If he's not good, I'm going to say it. So with Zach Dysart, he's got a strong arm, and he can't throw it in the ocean standing on the beach. And that's the problem from when he was at Miami of Ohio was consistency. It's not mechanically. How do you make a guy better that's mechanically sound? How do you just say, go be more consistent? I don't have that answer. So they will draft a quarterback this year. They will draft a quarterback. The Broncos are going to draft a quarterback. Put it in the books. It may be Brett Smith, who they had a private workout. I broke that story. They have a private workout with Brett Smith. They had a private workout with Stephen Morris. They are looking at quarterbacks to potentially push Dysart off the roster.
But Osweiler's safe.
Osweiler's safe for now, and so long as Manning's healthy, we're never going to see Osweiler play meaningful snaps for Denver. So, any other questions? Going twice? Sold. Thank you. Thank you again very much.
I don't know if you know how really fortunate we are to have Cecil here. We paid him in lasagna and bread. And it was phenomenal to have you again this year, and I don't think any of us can thank you enough for having put up with all of our maybe unintelligent questions, but they're questions that we all have wanted to know, and we got an expert to answer for us. So thanks again.